There is something you do that almost nobody around you notices. When something gets hard, you don't reach out. You manage it alone. You tell people you're fine. You wait until the weight becomes almost unbearable before you even consider saying anything. And even then, something in you closes, not because you're proud, not because you don't want support, but because somewhere in the process of growing up, needing people began to feel like a risk your nervous system decided it couldn't afford. And here's what most people don't realize. That decision didn't happen consciously. You didn't choose it. It formed the way most survival patterns form. Quietly, below the level of language, in the space between what happened and what you were able to name, psychology calls this a protective pattern. Not a personality flaw, not a character weakness. A pattern, built early, built for specific reasons. And once you see it clearly, something shifts. You stop reading your own behavior as a problem and start understanding it as the most logical response to something that genuinely happened to you. There are 5 traits, and each one runs deeper than most people expect. Trait 1. You learned that your needs made things harder for people. It didn't arrive as one clear moment. It came through accumulation, the sigh that followed your question, the irritation that showed up before the answer, the emotional distance that appeared precisely when you needed someone close, the small, almost imperceptible sense that your reaching out was something the other person was tolerating rather than welcoming. Nobody may have ever said it directly, but you felt it. And this is the part most people miss. Children don't need to be told something explicitly for it to become belief. They absorb, they observe, they translate every emotional signal from the people around them into conclusions about the world, about themselves, about what is safe and what isn't. So slowly, without choosing it, a conclusion formed beneath the surface. My needs make things harder? And here's the part that surprises people when they first hear it. That conclusion wasn't a mistake. It was accurate. It was reading the environment correctly. The problem is that the environment changed, and the conclusion stayed. It followed you into every adult relationship where support was available, and something in you still couldn't quite reach for it, because psychologically, your nervous system no longer processes asking for help as neutral. It processes it as a transaction with an unpredictable cost. And what people with this pattern privately fear most isn't rejection. It's the specific shame that comes after being helped, the feeling of having needed something and not being sure you deserved it. This is why some people would rather carry something until it breaks them than ask someone standing beside them to simply take part of the weight. Support stopped feeling like relief. It started feeling like exposure. So they become the person who says, "Don't worry about me," before anyone has offered to worry. The person who gives others endless patience and finds it almost impossible to receive the same in return. Underneath that pattern, if you look closely, isn't pride. It's grief. Quiet, unspoken, years-old grief from someone who learned before they had the language to question it that needing anything from another person might make them feel like too much. Trait 2. You trust yourself more than you trust anyone else's support. Here's something easy to miss about people who struggle to ask for help. They are often not fragile, not lost. In fact, many of them are unusually capable, resourceful, precise under pressure. They know how to keep moving when moving feels impossible. They have survived things privately that most people have never been asked to face. And here's the strange part. That's exactly what makes receiving help harder. Because after years of being the one who figures it out alone, the mind builds a working theory. I can only truly rely on myself. And that theory gets confirmed over and over by the simple fact that it keeps being true. You handle it again and again, until handling it alone stops being a strategy and starts being the only way your nervous system knows how to operate. This is where psychology found something most people don't expect. Studies on self-reliance show that people who score highest on measures of independence are not necessarily the ones who trust themselves most. They are often the ones who trust others least. The self-reliance isn't built on confidence. It's built on the quiet accumulation of experiences where leaning on someone led to disappointment. So what develops is not just the practical ability to manage alone. It's a nervous system that experiences the act of accepting support as genuinely uncomfortable, not because help is bad, but because accepting it requires a kind of surrender, a release of control. And for someone whose control has historically been the only reliable thing available, releasing it even briefly, even to someone trustworthy, feels like standing on ground that might not hold. This is why people with this trait don't just struggle to ask for help. They struggle to fully relax even when help arrives. They accept it with their words and stay tense in their body. They receive kindness and immediately feel the pull to repay it, justify it, prove they deserved it. That's not coldness. That's what happens when self-reliance stops being a choice and becomes the only home the nervous system has ever fully trusted. Trait 3. You confuse vulnerability with danger. Underneath the words, "I need help," is something even more exposed than the request itself, being seen, genuinely, in a moment of real need. And for people with certain emotional histories, that visibility doesn't feel safe. Maybe when you opened up before, what you shared was minimized. Maybe your pain was compared to someone else's and found smaller. Maybe you were taught directly or through years of quiet observation that emotions were something to manage privately, never displayed where someone might mistake them for weakness. So now when the thought of asking for help surfaces, your mind doesn't just think about the support. It thinks about everything that comes with it. The exposure, the honesty required, the admission of need, the moment of saying to another person clearly, "I cannot carry this alone." And if your nervous system has learned to associate that state with shame, with the particular pain of being open and finding nothing safe on the other side, then asking for help stops feeling like reaching out. It starts feeling like stepping into something with no floor. What develops instead is high functionality, high composure, a private interior life that almost nobody fully sees. You process alone. You recover alone. You return to the world looking completely fine. Not because you want to feel isolated, but because emotional privacy became the most reliable form of protection you ever found. And here's what's counterintuitive about this. The people who are best at appearing fine are often the ones who feel the most. Trait 4. You feel personally responsible for managing your pain alone. There's a particular kind of person who feels almost guilty needing support, not because they don't feel the weight of what they're carrying, but because somewhere inside, quietly and completely without ever consciously choosing it, they've come to believe that their struggles are theirs alone to solve. This usually forms in people who became emotionally responsible too early. Maybe you were the one who stayed, calm when everyone else fell apart. The easy one, the mature one, the one who sensed the tension in a room and made the silent decision not to add to it. Maybe you could feel the weight the people around you were already carrying, so you carried yours separately. And here's the thing about carrying pain separately long enough. It stops being behavior and becomes identity. You stop experiencing support as something available to you. You start experiencing it as something other people need more than you do. So when your own pain surfaces, the first instinct isn't to reach outward. It's to minimize. Other people have it worse. It's not that serious. I should be able to handle this. That internal voice that invalidates you before anyone else gets the chance to. It becomes so automatic you don't notice it anymore. You just know that when something hurts, the impulse is to make it smaller, to make sure nobody has to rearrange themselves because of what you feel. And the painful irony here is that this trait almost always lives in the most genuinely compassionate people. People who would appear immediately for someone else, who are warm, dependable, emotionally available in every direction except inward. Because when the pain belongs to them, the rules change entirely. They become harsh with themselves in a way they would never be with anyone they loved. Trait 5. Your independence became your identity before you had the chance to choose it. For many people who struggle to ask for help, independence is not a preference. It is identity. The deepest kind, the kind that wasn't chosen. It was constructed. Maybe you were praised for being the one who never needed much, admired for handling things alone, seen most clearly when you were useful, composed, contained. And if that happened consistently enough, the mind does something very understandable. It merges the survival behavior with the self-image. You don't just act independent. You become the independent one. And once that identity hardens, asking for help stops feeling like a practical decision. It starts feeling like a threat to the self you built. Because if you're the strong one, what happens when you need something? If you're the one who holds it together, what happens when you fall apart? If you're always the helper, what happens when you need to be helped? So you stay in character, even when you're exhausted, even when part of you wants nothing more than for someone to simply notice, without you having to ask, that you are not entirely fine. Here's the distinction psychology draws that most people have never heard articulated. There is healthy independence and there is defensive independence. Healthy independence says I can do things on my own and I can also receive support. Defensive independence says if I can't do it alone, I feel exposed, unsafe. Like I've failed at something fundamental. One comes from confidence. The other comes from a very old form of fear, and most people who struggle to ask for help never fully realize that the self-sufficiency they've spent years protecting may have originally been built not from strength, but from an environment where needing people simply wasn't safe. Your resilience is real. Your capability is real. Your strength is real. But real strength was never supposed to mean carrying everything alone. It was supposed to mean having enough security to put something down occasionally without feeling like you'd lost yourself. That's what this pattern, all 5 of these traits, has quietly cost you. Not your competence, not your capability, just the ability to let someone else hold part of the weight without it feeling like surrender. You were not born this way. You were not wired wrong. You developed these patterns because at some point needing people came with consequences, because support felt uncertain, because vulnerability got paired with pain enough times that your mind, doing exactly what it was designed to do, built walls and called them character. And now, with enough understanding and enough gentleness, those walls don't have to come down all at once, but they can begin to develop doors. You are allowed to have needs without apologizing for them. You are allowed to receive care without earning it through exhaustion first. You are allowed to ask for help and still be strong, still be capable, still be everything the people around you have always counted on, because real strength was never silent suffering. It was always the full capacity to be human.